Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to Friday at 4. Yeah, I know it's not Friday, it's Monday, but this is the last episode of the first year of VDC TV's Friday at 4. We are back, and we're back because, well, our social media director, Paul Bean, is back from Florida. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you very much, Guy. I'm glad to be back.
You bet. So before we get into it, you've been in Florida for a month and a half.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Well,
how was it?
It was pretty awesome. Let me just say quickly, folks, I want to be right on top of this. If we have any issues with sound or anything like that, please let us know. We want to make sure you can hear us well. We want you to be able to comment and join in the conversation. So let's test that out. Go ahead if you are watching, maybe say hello and make sure that you are part of the conversation, because that is very important to us at VDC. However, Florida was excellent. There were some really great times that I had there, and really the majority of it was spent with family. I have a grandfather that lives down in Stewart. I also have a grandmother that lives in Boynton Beach, as well as my brother who lives up in Destin, who's in the Air Force, and he recently got orders to go to England for the next 3 years. So the whole family spent Christmas there together on that Air Force base, which was pretty cool. But I am so glad to be back. I can't tell you, I can't be any more clear about that. I think one of the big things for me is, I wanted to go out there and explore around a little bit. A lot of people in Vermont, if you grew up here, you probably know. I think it's true. You end up maybe with somewhat of a limited perspective on things. If we're especially in the business that we're in, we're so deeply involved in what we do that a lot of the times we forget that the rest of the world exists. Would you say that's incorrect, Guy?
Sure.
So I felt the need to get out and explore a little bit. But all it did was remind me what I love so much about the Green Mountain State. Yeah, we have our problems here, but there's problems everywhere, including Florida, which a lot of us seem to have this, maybe not, it's a utopian vision, maybe not utopian is the right word, but hedonistic perhaps? Tropical paradise.
Sure.
Yeah, and it is to a certain degree, but Vermont is so wholesome, authentic, and it's home, and I'm glad to be here back with you guys in the studio. And I hope that everybody had a great couple of holidays, and I'm ready to get back into session. I don't know about you, but I'm actually really looking forward to it this year, Guy. I know that sounds crazy because most of the time, I've spoke to legislators and folks, and they've kind of been, groaning like, oh, here we go again. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? This could be the best year yet.
Well, I want to get into that, but first, a couple very important things we need to say. The first is that we are right now going into our first full year. We are at the 802 Scoop Studios on Main Street in Barrie. And we're very, very grateful for the folks who run 802 Scoop for allowing us to be here in this terrific studio. As much as we miss the Bean Studios, and you will be back there with Creamies, right, Paul?
Oh, I definitely plan to be, and we'll be doing some interviews there too, but we'll definitely make use of the space.
Yeah, good. The other thing is, thank you to our two sponsors. Right now, there will be more, but right now we have two wonderful sponsors, Procter Gas, Judy Taranovich, offering heating fuel, gas to really all throughout central Vermont, Rutland area, Procter. Thank you so much, Judy, for your sponsorship. And also, Village Homes, operated by Randy Rulo, builder of fine and even affordable Vermont homes, and a real can-do guy. And so we thank you very much, Randy Rulo and Judy Taranovich, for your sponsorship, because this all doesn't happen without sponsors, and thank you. So, Paul, speaking of Florida, speaking of tropical paradise, speaking of, there is life outside of Vermont, got this email from Mark Coaster. formerly who ran for Congress. And here's a picture of him in a tux. Well, first of all, if you know Mark, Mark in a tux, those two don't always go together. His handle is a logger, and that's what he is. He's a logger. But he's at Mar-a-Lago with General Michael Flynn. And there's a picture of him with Lara Logan, the journalist.
Yep.
And just having a great time. And he sent all these pictures of Mar-a-Lago, which I'd never seen it before. But wow, does it look beautiful.
You know, Guy, I actually drove by it twice when I was down there. I went once myself just to check it out. And then my girlfriend Carrie wanted to come see it too. So we drove by it twice just to see it. And, oh man, it is beautiful. It's like one of those places you see, you just say to yourself, man, like, it is beyond the money there in Palm Beach, that area where Trump lives, is beyond comprehension of small town Vermonter.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, I have heard that and you go to other parts of the country. We went to Texas, to the Austin area, came back, and you know, in Austin there are huge square miles of new housing. They're actually building housing now. What a concept, huh? And I came back to Barrie, and a lot of old houses, and no one's building anything. You know, it's just quite a thing. It's
interesting, right? You know, you definitely, it's nice to see the growth that's there in Florida, right? And the difference in contrast to Vermont. I mean, it is just so different, right? It's probably polar opposites when it comes right down to it. And yeah, it is nice to see. But I will say, you know, you start driving further and further down that coast on the East Coast where Trump lives, and the more high-rises you see, the more housing you see, the more, you know, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, because it is beautiful and it's good. There's people living there, they're enjoying life. But seeing the other side of it has made me really grow to appreciate this state and how we don't have any of that. And to be quite honest with you, I don't ever want to see it be like that. I don't want it ever to look like strip mall after strip mall and high-rise after high-rise. And, you know, every complaint I really have about the place was overshadowed by the exact opposite of what I saw in Florida. It made me really appreciate some of our problems, honestly, which maybe sounds kind of crazy, but...
No. You know, Vermont is, when it's all said and done, we live in a beautiful state. And it's got its problems, including unaffordability for a lot of people. And a lot can be done about that. But you just drive along and you go, wow, this is a beautiful state.
That's right.
Yeah. And no worries with traffic most of the time.
That's my biggest complaint by a long shot, and it's not even close. The amount of times I decided I wasn't going to go somewhere or do something because I didn't want to have to deal with the traffic was like, whew, I would never do that here, you know? And I don't do it because it's like, it's too aggravating. It is aggravating, but it's dangerous, right? Like, there was one news story when I was down there, which I was watching the news quite closely, by the way, of 3 officers that got killed by accident on the side of Interstate 95. Wow. Just somebody trying to turn around somebody else, didn't see it. There's 2-3 cops on motorcycles, and 2 of them passed away immediately, and 1 of them passed away in the hospital a few days later. And it was, to me, that was just like, okay, so they got problems here too. I mean, I knew that, but it was a little more eye-opening. Yeah,
that's right. Well, we just had someone walk into the studio. He's shaking his head, which I think means don't talk about me. Is that what you're trying to say, Tim? Our managing editor of Vermont Daily Chronicle, Tim Page, just walked in. We're not really set up for 2 people on camera, so I'm not going to ask you to come on camera, Tim. But just so you know, he did come in, and he's probably thinking, well, if I were sitting there, I would say. So if you do sort of want to add to the conversation, Tim, feel free to pretend you're on a Zoom call, raise your hand, and maybe you can be part of this. Speaking of which, we welcome comments. We welcome people coming in and having their say. I know we haven't done the show for a month and a half, and maybe some people, we got sort of out of the habit, but we're getting back in the habit. Our next show will be Friday.
Yeah.
Friday at 4, like the name of the show, Friday at 4. And we intend to stay on that on a steady basis.
Well, Guy, you do know marketing, one of the best marketing schemes is to pull back a little bit for a while and then to put yourself back out there.
It is?
Yes, it is. Do you ever hear of the McRib?
The McDonald's thing?
Yeah. You know the excitement that people get about the
Okay.
McRib because it's back, because they've been deprived of it for so long. Or another good example of this kind of marketing is like when I ran for state Senate in 2024 or 22. You know, you put out your lawn signs for the general or the primary election, but then you pull every single one of them and then rebuild back up the momentum as you go into the general election. It's a very prominent method, Guy. People, if they get into a certain repetition, I wondered about this. People, maybe they're in the habit of watching us, but maybe they say, oh, there are those guys again. They're talking about the same old jibber jabber, every week. I don't need to tune in. But now they're like, oh, they're back. Where were they? What are they doing?
They're still talking.
And they're still talking jibber jabber.
There's a nice old saying, which is absence makes the heart grow fonder.
That's true.
Yep.
If you guys can hear that, Timothy, he chimed in and he said, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I've heard that before, and I haven't always liked that one. But
I'll tell you though, Tim, one thing that I'm very, very glad to be absent from is 50 degree below weather. Tim wrote a story that was in today's Chronicle on the all-time record recorded low in Vermont, 1933 in Bloomfield, which is this invisible town up in the Northeast Kingdom, and 50 degrees below zero on this day, December 30th, 1933. And I'm thinking, well, the country's just gone into a big depression. How much more fun could it be to be 50 below? Good heavens. So, Paul, I thought that we might kind of look at not necessarily what we think were the top stories, although we want to do some of that, but what the readers consider to be the top stories by virtue of their clicking and their reading stories.
So, I'm sorry, Guy.
No, go ahead.
I just want you to know I do have the story pulled up here so that folks can follow along with us as we chat a little about them.
Oh, no kidding. The thing that I wrote today?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The
way
top
to go,
10.
Paul. All right.
Well,
I didn't know that.
This is what's so great about this new setup over here is there's all these different gadgets that I get to use that I can play around with the screen share. We might even be able to show videos here, Guy, at some point.
Well, bring it on.
I might have to try at some point.
And Zoom too? Do you think we can do that yet?
Yeah, Michael Booten just told me he seems to think that we're going to be able to do virtual guests. They seem to have it figured out. So,
speaking of Michael Booten, the fellow who's often in this studio doing Barry Beat, I ran into him at the Young Republicans dinner on the 21st, along with Mike Tagliavia of Right Side. And here are basically two Vermont media guys who got elected to the Vermont House of Representatives. So I just think that's the coolest thing, that Vermont media now has a sort of more of a conduit with the legislature, because these guys will be in both places.
Well, I think before we kind of have some things we want to talk about, but I think that's probably one of the biggest things we could touch upon is just how, I don't know, Guy, maybe this is the wrong word, but friendless we felt at times throughout our time in the last few years, but especially last year in the State House, feeling like we're kind of not alone, but alone.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of media doing the same kind of work that we're doing. I'm not going to say that they're not doing the work, but they're doing different kinds of work. And it is encouraging to know going into 2025 that we have those two and a number of other people that are, I don't know, fighting the same fight, so to say. If that's because we're in the fight of the business of truth and truth telling, but I don't know, maybe you can speak to that a little bit better than I can.
Well, one of the other big changes in the legislature, media coverage this year, You probably don't know this yet, Paul, but VT Digger's bureau chief, Sarah Mirhoff,
Yeah.
she has left, and she is now the new Matt Musgrave. She's now the new the head
At AGC.
the head communications and PR person, legislative affairs, I guess, for Associated General Contractors of Vermont. Is that what it?
Oh,
I have
yeah.
the name right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's in this business, we laughingly call that going over to the dark side.
Yeah.
When you go from journalism to public relations, which is just a natural transition. I've made the switch back and forth 3 or 4 times in my career, and I find that neither of them is dark, and neither of them is light. It's really it's what you bring to it.
That's
You
true.
can do wonderful service in both capacities, and neither is more righteous than the other.
Well, that's interesting news, Guy. I mean, that's I have a history with those groups there
Indeed.
and those individuals, so I can't help to wonder if I wish her all the best and all the luck in the world, as well as that organization.
Yeah, that's right. He's learning, isn't he, Tim? Yeah. Okay.
The job was open for a while.
Is that right?
Yes, it was. It was open for a while.
I find it's been many years since someone knocked on my door and said, "Gee, we've got an opening. Would you like to?"
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, is that because my true talent level has asserted itself and no one wants to hire me? Or is that because I'm just so out there with my views that no one wants to hire me? I don't know what it is. Not that I'm not looking anyway. In fact, I can't imagine going back to working as a communications person for some outfit. It would have to be an incredible cause for me to give that up.
Sure.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Because what's better than this?
I know.
Yeah,
It's called freedom.
that's right. And having a real role in more freedom for Vermont.
That's right.
Yeah, so we like that.
I agree.
So getting to our top stories. You, Paul, wrote the top story.
Oh,
Top
boy.
story of the year.
Okay, but should we be honest about what we discovered about that one?
Well, yes, we can, but there's a but.
Okay, so
Okay, so anyways, the number one story by far this year was Paul's post on Mennonite woman removed 45 tons of muck with joy and singing, which was, we all went through the flood. We all knew all the of the flood. And here are these Mennonites coming from Pennsylvania and Virginia and North Carolina. Hello, North Carolina. Coming up here and literally getting their dresses dirty, mucking out basements, singing hymns the whole time. And I thought, what an incredible display of love and sacrifice on behalf of strangers. What a thing. And so, Paul, would you tell us more about that story and
sure. Well, I think I just saw, and I'll pull it up for people who want to see it. I saw the story. Governor Scott actually had made a post about the image itself, and I said, "Man, what a powerful image that is! I wonder if there's a story in there for us." And I remember sending it to you, or maybe even just speaking on the phone to you about it quickly, and you were like, "Oh yeah, that's great. We got to. That's a good story." In that news voice there. That's my. But they removed 2,700 buckets of muck from the homeowner's basement in a single day. The website says that's 45 tons of muck, and that's I've moved 5 tons of pellets in a single day with my brother, and that was exhausting. So I can only imagine what 45 tons of muck felt like for these ladies.
Wow.
But they didn't seem to care, and man, were the residents grateful. This is a quote from one of the ladies. She said, "We're grateful for the love that we felt from all of you. I truly felt the kindness and kinship from all of you. Your presence at this time was the healing balm," writes one Barrie resident. I just think I scoured the internet looking for information on the story and trying to find out what basically people were saying about it. And I think it's just an incredible thing. I'm so thankful that I was able to write this story and that it was our #1 story of the year, because it wasn't some, I don't know. Sometimes in the business of this news business, we get into a little bit of dirty laundry here and there. And
A lot of it.
Yeah, very often. And I'm really grateful that this
is the right kind of dirty laundry.
This
Not
is
the dress is dirty.
That's a good point. It really is dirty
Yeah.
laundry. Yeah, maybe that's why it did so well. But I should just add one caveat to it, or one asterisk mark, if you will. We may or may not have discovered at a certain point that this story had been boosted for a while.
Well, that's right.
But it was boosted on social media long after it had
Yeah.
gained traction
Yeah.
online.
It was doing great all on its own.
So, and then it just
Yeah.
happened to need it didn't need a little kick, but we tried
Yeah.
something, and
Yeah.
we maybe learned a little
Yeah.
lesson about Facebook ads, but
Right.
now we know.
It's all, and in all fairness, I do think I remember Tim. We were in the car, and he says, there's this picture that the governor put on his Facebook page of a bunch of Mennonite women, because Tim lives here in Barrie. And I think the first time I ever heard any mention of it, was from you, Tim. So that's sometimes, folks, that's how our stories work, is that someone mentions something and then the other one goes, yeah. And it's a collaborative work, which is the way a newsroom should be. So even though we don't actually have a newsroom, we have a collaborative relationship, and that's good.
Well, what's this guy?
Well, this is a studio.
You're
This
right.
isn't quite a newsroom.
You're right.
Yeah. The old days of, boy, is that ever dating me, of a newsroom. Hello.
Well, in my mind, a
Was-
newsroom is like, I guess, there's probably a real definition of a newsroom, but in my mind, it's like, it's where they broadcast the news from.
No, it's where reporters sit around in front of their typewriters, or in my day, their typewriters, and then their word processors, and bang out their stories. And the editors looking at them going, come on,
let's go.
bring it on, et cetera, et cetera. If you've ever seen like Lou Grant or whatever, that old TV show, that's fairly realistic for what it's like. Anyway, not that really matters. So our number 1 story was the Mennonite woman. Number 2 story was a very, boy, the exact opposite of what good. Is there anything redeeming? Is there any good that can come out of this? And the answer really was no. Is that a pediatrician in Milton headed into work, into the clinic, and left her toddler in the car on a summer day, and the baby died in the car, in the hot car. And that was one of Mike Donahue was a reporter with me. Well, I was a reporter with him at the Free Press, and his desk was right next to mine, and he is now, the Chronicle's really our premier cops in court. He's the state's premier cop and court reporter.
That's right.
But he's certainly the Chronicle's #1. And he, on a good day, Mike calls me up. I get this call, usually around 10 o'clock. He'll say, you never call, you never write. That's the first thing he says, because I haven't called him first. And then he says, hey, boss, I got a talker for you. And first of all, I'm not his boss. That's just a polite expression he uses to get my attention. But he says, I've got a talker. And when Mike says he's got a talker, it means this is going to be almost certainly the #1 story of the day. This is the story that people are going to go, oh my gosh. They're going to share it, and it's going to go nuts. And the #1, you might say, talker of the year of Mike's was this terrible thing where this woman, and the thing that happened after that was
A lot of the information just went poof.
right.
It's almost, I'm not going to say that it was quote-unquote scrubbed, however, it felt like that, trying to find more information. And several of us who work with and for the Chronicle are still keeping our eyes open to see if we can find anything else
Right.
out.
Guy, could you repeat that?
Sure.
Just
Move a little closer, Tim.
If you are going to chime in, maybe I can find a
Yeah.
microphone for you just
Yeah.
quickly here.
So basically what he said was, and Mike is working on this too, that there's a follow-up story there that we haven't gotten to yet, which is that any legal action being taken against this woman, what really happened, what's the follow-up on this? A child did die as an act of apparently some kind of terrible negligence, and will there be any action on this? And one of the questions that people asked, a lot of comments on this story, boy, a lot of comments. And one of the things they said was, if this had just been some, as they would say, some welfare mom who left a kid in a car, almost certainly they feel action would have been taken, some sort of legal action. But it was a pediatrician and an outstanding citizen, obviously accidental. And the response from the police is, well, this is all very tragic, but.
Wasn't she also possibly involved in different organizations?
Well, she was a leader in some pediatric pharmacy or something like that. Yeah. And was quickly, you would go to that organization and you would find, 404, file not found, it's gone. So they had immediately taken it down. So that's part of the world that we live in now, where people come and go on the internet, that's for sure. I think we're trying to wire Tim here. Okay.
Hold on a second.
Sure.
I think Tim should be good to go now. Hold on a second. You want to just give a little sound check, Tim?
Check,
Keep going.
check.
Keep trying.
Check.
Go ahead.
Check.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Clip it to your shirt, Tim.
Okay, Tim, you want to just try one more time for me? I'm sorry, folks.
Check.
Check. That's going to be you. Okay. We should be all set now. Thank you for bearing with us.
Yep.
Tim, if you feel like chiming in, they're not going to be able to see you, but if you have a comment, feel free.
Just wave.
Yep.
give us a...
Get my attention.
Yep.
So, Guy, that was story number 2.
Yep. Number 3, another child in danger, but the exact opposite. It was an incredibly good feel-good story. A girl in Cambridge, I believe she was 8 years old, fell into an icy pond, and a state trooper got the word really quickly, a woman state trooper, Michelle Meyer, I believe her name is, and there is video of her, from her the camera on her person, furiously putting on one of these not a wetsuit, but basically I've got to get in some freezing water and not die suits, and putting that on and then diving into the water. And as she approaches, you see what looks like it might be a body floating there, and she goes and she gets the child and pulls her out, and she and another state trooper revive that child. And it was just one of the most dramatic, moving things. And it happened the first week of January. So obviously very cold, but also a very hard time of year for a lot of people. And the story behind the story in this one and in one other major story is, why didn't the Vermont media cover that?
That's a good question.
Because WCAX, it was a few days before they did, and they may have had some sort of technical reasons, perhaps, maybe, TV stations like video, and they had a hard time getting access to the video. That could be it. But there are other very prominent statewide media who I will not name out of, I guess, professional courtesy for the moment, who basically, if it's a state trooper who has maybe shot someone with a non-lethal round and that person fell off the roof, or they've done something else, maybe a little questionable that gets them investigated, they're all over that. But let a state trooper risk her life dying into a freezing pond to save a child. And for some reason, that just isn't news. And it is news. And I simply do not understand the mentality. And some people said, well, it's just they don't like cops. They don't think cops should get good press. I have a hard time thinking that it's that cut and dried. But
It could just be plain negligence.
which is really true, because we miss stories.
All the time people ask, like, where's your piece on blah, blah, blah? And I'm saying, well, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Like the eclipse, we did almost nothing on the eclipse.
Oh, how could you miss it?
Yeah. So that was kind of my thinking, is that everyone else is covering the death out of this. Everyone knows about it. What are we going to do? Well, we sat out in the field and we looked up. And, okay. Yeah. So.
I was working on the Chronicle
Yeah.
You were?
as it happened.
Oh, no kidding. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's dedication. Bonus for you. No,
Yeah.
no, forget that. I didn't say that. So that was story number 3, and it was a strange. Again, story number 4 was strange in a different way, in that it was Tim and Paul. I think you both remember this. We were sort of shrugging, saying, "What the heck?" It was Miss Vermont crowned. The number 4 story of the year was
Yeah.
Miss Vermont. Is, frankly, that's normally that's a shrug of a story. No offense to Miss Vermont and all the would-be beauty queens out there, but that is not a high. But I think what happened there, and Paul, you've been talking a lot about this, about going viral nationally.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have a few theories on it. I think you're probably right that within the whole beauty queen space,
Right.
that yes, she probably did pretty well there. I also think, you know what? Be honest, internet is the internet. People are more likely to click on certain things. Here's a pretty girl. What's that all about? I mean, it could be as simple as that. That's not uncommon, but I think there's probably something to that too. Kind of like the Mennonite story, how you catch a groove within a community, whether it be the faith community or maybe the beauty queen community, which is certainly a thing. I mean, it's out there.
Yeah.
She just was successful. I mean, that story was very successful, and that was a story that wasn't originally our stories, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
We just found it a press release,
Yeah.
really. That's what it was. I think we might have customized it a little bit, but not too much. Is
No,
that your memory of it, Tim? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It does surprise me that the Vermont Olympians did not get as much coverage,
Right.
especially Ilona Maher.
Right.
Hope I'm pronouncing the last name correctly.
She did pretty well in the Chronicle,
Yeah.
but nothing like that.
Yeah, and you have I'm not disparaging Miss Vermont in any way. It's just, you have someone who's been putting themselves out there on behalf of women, positive body image, on top of is a world-class athlete,
Right.
is resetting the standards for that field, and the story was beat out by
Right.
the beauty queen. Again, not disparaging.
Okay,
but-
here's a comment from Big Siege, which maybe this is also something I was kind of getting at too. Maybe he writes, or she writes, I don't know, Big Siege is a good girl or boy, no idea.
know.
I'm sorry to assume. I clicked on the story because I assumed Vermont would pick a dude. So, I mean, there's maybe something to that too. I don't really know. I don't know. That probably, people read, oh, Vermont, Miss Vermont. Like, Vermont's so backwards and inverted, you'd only think they would only
Well, we laugh, but yeah. So the number 5 story, and again, this one, it just baffled me that the media got cold feet on this one. And that's that state police investigating social media claims about Vermont pedophile map gathering. That's minor attracted persons gathering this weekend. And that was just, and it was, the more we looked at it, the more it was clear that this isn't just an internet thing. This is a real gathering. This is really planned. But I asked the governor at the press conference, what do you make of this? And he said, well, the state police are looking into it. But the other media were like, either didn't touch it at all, sorry folks, no news here, nothing to see, or they said, well, it's just those folks in Plainfield, those rednecks in Plainfield, which, Plainfield isn't exactly a redneck town, just stirring up fear and hate and ignorance too. And it was like, wow, I mean, that's quite a take. But
That is the most unnecessarily PC statement I've ever heard.
Yeah, really. So that, but it just, sometimes it just slams you in the face, the media's determination, some media's determination to just refuse to cover a story. And this is something we don't refuse to cover a story because it's whatever. If it's news, it's news, and we cover it. So, number 6, this was one of these sort of theater of the absurd stories. Burlington elected a new mayor. That in itself was a big story. They elected their first woman mayor and the first new mayor since Moreau Weinberger took office, 10 years ago, whenever that was, in the middle of some real trouble. A city beset with crime and homelessness elected a progressive mayor, Emerald Mulvaney Stanek, who, by the way, I think grew up in Barrie. At least her mother mother and father live in Barrie here, not too far from here. But so what happened there was that some of her friends set up a free meal train, free meals for the mayor. And they were delivering these meals to the mayor and her spouse, and I believe their one child in the North End somewhere. I think it's the North End. And it was like, well, between the two of them, they're making like over $250,000 a year. Two very well-paid people. And it doesn't Uber, Tim, you lived in Burlington for a while. Is there food delivery there?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So you can always do takeout, right?
Yeah.
And so Mike Donahue, again, thank you, Mike, wrote a big talker story on the mayor is getting free food delivered to her in a city with hungry people and homelessness. Our very well-paid mayor, her followers are giving her food. But the real story there wasn't just, the mayor could have said, maybe should have said, well, what do you think, Tim? What could the mayor have said in that situation?
Well, I just want to make it clear, we were not trying to set up the mayor. If anything, we're kind of expecting her, especially when asked on television, what the response was to this. She could easily have said, we appreciate this. However, there are people in our community who truly need this, which is true. That money should really be going towards housing and feeding the numerous homeless people or people who might have a home but don't have food, right, for whatever reason can't go to a food shelf. That's where that support should be going. And she could have just said that. Not only would she have salvaged, I hate to say there was any dignity at risk at the moment before she spoke, but she could have salvaged any dignity that she may have felt, was under threat. She may have gained a lot of support most likely from both sides of the aisle if she had done that.
But you didn't.
No.
No, no.
No.
You basically
she
just doubled
ended
down
up-
on it, if I remember right.
If I remember correctly, her constituents were the people most offended by her responses, because the implication of some of her things were that women, or lesbian women specifically, were less able than men or women in marriages with a man to, despite the income, were less able to put food on the table. And that rubbed a lot of people, and probably rightfully so, the wrong way. Now, that was definitely not her intent by saying that. However, it felt like we had put the ball up on a tee in front of her, and she hurled the bat at the umpire.
Yeah.
It.
All right. Good. So story number 7, I believe, and again, we just go ping pong from absurd to awful. Basically, a woman was found beaten to death in Burlington. Really simple, short, straightforward. Hey, this woman was beaten to death. It happened to happen near one of the homeless pods. Don't really know if that was connected or not. But what it was a street crime story. And not too many of them made the top 12, but dozens of these stories were of great interest to our readers, where it just seemed that people who had been arrested, in one case, a fellow had 1,600 police interactions in the last 10 years. 1,600. And he's still out on the street. And the whole catch him, release him, catch him, release him, sometimes within hours, especially in Burlington, within hours of being caught, they're cited and they're back and they're doing the same thing again.
We just had, I published right before coming over here, an article from, was it Mike Donahue?
Yes.
About a man who's currently homeless in Barrie, originally from St. John's Barrie, if I'm correct. I might, there's a chance, very slim, that I might be incorrect, so don't hold me to that. However, I believe it's the same guy who, all the way back to 2015, which is a while back, given that he's only 33, had numerous issues. I believe the Caledonia Record covered him back then as well. Yeah. And it's just one thing after another, and it might have been the Record. Someone from 2015 had an article saying, really, if it wasn't for this one defense attorney, he would be there. Everyone knew that he was going to violate again.
Wow.
And the same kind of things as now.
Right.
Robbery, assault, larceny. And by no means am I saying that people need to be given a chance, for reformation of their life. But this is an instance where, according to Mike Donahue in his reporting, police already knew. Yeah. Police were aware that he was in violation of everything, and they just let him.
Well, is it the police though, or is it I think it's more the state's attorneys and the judges.
Well, no,
in this case,
Barrie police knew he was in violation of his probation.
Okay. So maybe they could have picked
already
him up
knew that
proactively.
Right.
Okay.
Now, I mean, the logistics of doing that for everyone is a bit excessive. But, that being said, it's an ongoing issue.
I wondered, I had someone express to me earlier today, what if the judge were to say, Mr. Jones, am I going to see you here in 7 days if I release you now? And because if I don't see you, you will be spending the next 7 days after that in jail. Count on it. Guaranteed. You can choose. 7 days in jail, or you actually come back for your appointment. So I just wonder, we are going to be all over this to see what the legislature is doing about public safety, about bail reform. They've been dragging their feet so slowly for years. If anything, they're heading in the other direction of less bail, and you've got to be 24 years old before you're treated in family court. There's a powerful movement in the legislature against sort of accountability, real criminal accountability. And we're going to be following this because people are just getting so sick of this.
Well, and that's an interesting dilemma that they're facing, because they're also dealing with the rising costs,
Yeah.
but at the same time, lack of returns
Right.
that they're getting. So currently, bed space is at a premium, and there's no way that the state can afford to do what it used to do, which is send them out of state. That was
Well,
too expensive.
Then obviously there's a money
So-
problem there too. And so where should
Correct.
our money be spent?
Exactly.
So another story, more of a good news story, I think. Someone invaded a Vermont home and was chased off with a muzzleloader.
Woo!
Yeah.
That's some real backwoods business
that's-
right there.
That's right. It's like you attacked the wrong home, pal.
With a muzzle loader.
Yeah, with a muzzleloader. Story number 9. Now we're getting into energy policy, and of course, energy, or mostly climate type stuff, was a huge legislative thing this year. Paul, you are going to be covering this coming year. You're going to be covering energy.
Yeah.
This particular story had to do with, well, if 2035 rolls around and the state of Vermont has totally banned the sale of internal combustion cars, I kind of wonder if that's really going to happen, but that's on the books right now.
Yeah.
California did it, therefore we have to do it. It's just this insane law/regulation, in my opinion.
Well,
But the idea is, well, you can just go to New Hampshire and get one.
yeah, and I think, Guy, we're increasingly, as time goes on, we're going to see less and less of this.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not so certain that, this year and maybe in 2 years, this left party, whatever, the Democratic Party, they're going to fight back for some of their seats, and maybe you'll see a little bit of a boomerang.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think increasingly it is becoming obvious to many people that what Vermont does in terms of the energy sector or any environmental decision that we make is not going to have an impact on what they are claiming is causing climate change. So carbon climate change, right? That's the overarching theory. So like even based within their theory, Vermont's very minuscule efforts aren't going to change or do anything. That's assuming, by the way, that their theory is correct, which some people say it's not, and I would be one of them.
Is disputed.
Is disputed.
Yeah.
But
So
point being, I just think we're going to see less and less
yeah.
bills like
And
this.
is that because of the number one story of the Democrats lost their supermajority, and therefore they've got to deal with a governor now who's saying, actually, I'm not all that crazy about aggressively attacking carbon. I mean, he talks it, but when it comes to a clean heat standard, he's not interested in that. There's a lot of other stuff he's not interested in either. Do you think there's a connection there?
I think they're going to have to deal with a lot of that. I think that's probably the biggest connection, is that there's been a pushback from the voters that they're just not buying it. They're just not buying it. And, that's not to say, look, I'm not going to sit and argue with somebody who does, look, if you believe in climate change and you believe that, you want to do something, you want to help, I'm not going to say you shouldn't. I think if that's what you believe, by all means, this is America. You have the right to believe what you want to believe and take action therein. But at the end of the day, I think most people realize that Vermont and punishing Vermonters, penalizing Vermonters at the cost of saving the planet is unrealistic, and it's not going to get anybody anywhere. And I think a lot of people, even within the Democratic Party, are realizing this.
Right.
I'm hopeful,
Right.
but I know hubris tends to be, as somebody who's dealt with it.
As a practical matter, they're saying, look, voters do not want to give up the warmth of their home. They don't want to give up their cars. We're going to have to crack this nut some other way. Tim, what's up?
It reminds me, I mean, because to me that is probably, even though it might not be our top ranking article, I think that is the biggest news the state had this year, which is, to quote you when I called you about the election results, what you thought of it. And as you said, in a single day, Vermont went from all blue to solidly purple. And I think that's one of the things we're going to be seeing is a return to a more balanced, moderate, reality in this state,
Right.
rather than politicians trying to pander to the most extreme. People realizing that these politicians don't actually have our interests. We were talking about that in the car the other day. Who was it again? I believe it was Rob Roper highlighted the broadcast of it was one of the Democrat legislators.
Oh, Phil Baruth.
Yes,
Senate Pro
openly
Tem Phil
saying
Baruth.
not to listen to your constituents or
Right.
their concerns. There was another good clip that he put out there of yet another legislator saying, we're not here for the poor of Vermont. We're here to save the planet.
That's
Right.
Mark McDonald
Mark
also
McDonald.
voted
Yeah.
out.
Who, by the
And-
way, lost his job.
Yeah, he did lose his job.
I
And-
met
and
Larry
that's-
Hart, by the way, the other day.
Oh,
He's a
wonderful.
Great guy.
And that's what happens when these people abandon their own constituents.
That's what we call hubris.
Right.
It's a
Right.
good thing to have ideals, but when those ideals are placed before the people that you're there to protect,
So one of the changes, the stark changes I've seen in the legislature now and the legislature before. Paul, you and I used to go into these press conferences in the speaker's office, and it was sort of like pronouncements, it shall be done thus,
Yes. Yes.
and there was not an awful lot of give and take because, hey, we're the supermajority. We're running the show. And at Jill Korinsky's, Speaker Jill Korinsky's press conference last few weeks ago, I asked her, so if you say everything's on the table with school funding, because it was mostly about this school funding crisis, does that include also maybe the universal school meals, the $25-30 million that the state's spending to buy every student a breakfast and a lunch, whether they need it or want it or not? Because that's a supermajority thing. That was like, hey, we think it's cool, so we're going to pass it. And they'll just have to pay for it because we're in charge.
Deal with it.
Yeah, deal with it, pretty much. And she looks at me, and while the person at the microphone is saying, well, yeah, sort of, kind of, and whatever, she looks at me and goes, yeah, that's on the table. That's absolutely on the table. And just not only the thing itself, but the affect and we get it. We're in a whole new world here.
That's exactly. I mean, I was just going to bring up. We talked about this. I talked to you on the phone last. The whole situation with the Senate secretary. Last year we walk in just tearing us a new one, trying to take a picture or a video or something in front of the Senate House, the Senate chamber. Which there are some rules in the State House. If you spend time there, there's certain things you can and cannot do. But I don't know, Guy. I mean, I felt many times walking into that building last year that we were not welcome there.
Right.
But which, of course,
we were a marginalized community. Paul.
We are a marginalized community.
Yeah. And maybe now we're not so marginalized.
I would say so.
Yeah, that's a nice thought.
Yeah.
We don't want to do the hubris thing
I actually
either,
think
but
it's true. I think we're not
Yeah.
marginalized, and I agree with you. We want to check ourselves and be very careful who we are. Who are we talking about?
Right.
Because we're in the news business.
Right.
But at the very least, it does feel, again, like there are friends in
Yeah.
that building.
That's right. That's right. So the last two stories before we wrap up. Burlington school board member, former star athlete, busted for fentanyl trafficking. Anything in Burlington goes large. Anything sort of holy cow in Burlington is 3 times as holy cow as it is anywhere else in the state. So that story, that went really big. And the number 12 story, a huge amount of money from the Volkswagen settlement, which is basically Volkswagen did something bad about carbon emissions, and they had to pay the state hundreds of millions of dollars as a settlement. Well, the state decided, let's spend all that money, or a lot of that money, on buying electric school buses. Electric buses, because we want to, get our kids thinking electric, really cool, Well, as it turns out, some of those buses, a lot of those buses, especially the early generation, they don't work.
Especially not in the
they've
cold.
stopped working, and especially they lose up to 80% of their range in the winter, in the
Yep.
cold weather. So they bought some school buses for the long travels in the winter and Vermont's rural roads.
Yeah.
And, well, there's a little bit of a range problem there. And to me, that's just like, someone would be fired. Some manager who did that, they'd be fired. But if you're in government, no.
You probably get a promotion.
Yeah, it's probably, well,
I'm
you
being-
like your attitude. You like
Yeah.
your spirit.
Yeah.
Yet again, it's something that might work well in Southern California, but doesn't
Florida.
really work too well in Vermont when we try to do the same thing.
That's right. So this is the kind of thing, we're going to be all over this coming, and Friday, Paul, we're going to, maybe with Mike on Zoom, hopefully. Paul, you're going to be covering energy and one other topic, and we haven't decided what that is yet, but
We'll figure it out.
We're going to, I will be absolutely focusing on public safety, crime, that kind of thing, and everything else. And Mike Bielawski is going to do healthcare and education. And Tim, you don't know it yet, but you're going to have one too. Surprise, surprise. You're going to be following a committee. And we're going to be, I hope, informing people better about what really is happening in the legislature than we ever have before. That's my goal for this coming year.
I like that goal, guy.
Yeah. So I think, Paul, and Tim, I think we're about done. Does anyone have a brief, oh so brief, last word?
I was just going to say quickly, I think you said our goal to be to inform the public better than we ever have.
Yeah.
And not only them, but ourselves. Because
Yeah.
by ourselves, I think, just being completely transparent with folks over, like last year, for example, we would spend some time in committee rooms. We would spend some time going to certain events, whatever it was. But to be in that State House this year means we're going to be spending more time in room with people, not just watching from afar, which we will do plenty of that too.
Yeah.
But we will be there making it known that our presence is felt and that people are going to take our reporting seriously as proven. I would say, I would argue, as proven last year they did, but just as much as they're going to be informed, they're going to take it as seriously too, because we're going to bring to the table what it takes to accomplish that. And I think that would be all I would have to add to what you had to say.
Works for me. Yeah, Tim.
I would just want to say 2 things. One is that there's a reason why we're putting this information out, and that is because Vermonters definitely have the right to know. But as a consumer of news as well, and this is completely from myself and not official from the Chronicle, although it may be, but news in and of itself can be a rabbit hole that leads nowhere. However, especially now in this state, we're going to have a much more balanced legislature. So if there's an issue that needs to be addressed and you have ideas for them, reach out to your, it might sound, almost cliche at this point, but reach out to your legislators. reach out to these committees once they reshuffle and reform, because they want to hear from you.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was it's going to be even easier to keep track of at least the transcripts of these
Right.
meetings.
That's going to be exciting.
Due to Tom Evslin, one
That's
of our
right.
contributors.
And we're going to be talking about this more on Friday, but one of the I think of him as, if Vermont has an Elon Musk, it's Tom Evslin, and he has come up with a way to really easily read everything that is said in a State House committee room. So there's no more hiding of what was said anymore. Maybe there never was, but boy, there sure isn't now. And we're going to be showing people, hopefully on the screen, exactly how they can do that for themselves, and we're going to be doing it a lot too.
We're definitely be able to show them how to do that now with this fancy technology I have over here.
That's right. Good. So thank you for tuning in, and we will be back on Friday, 4 o'clock. Friday at 4.